Juniper by Monica Furlong, Chapter 9. The worst thing that ever happened in the first part of my stay with Uni was the day she spent a long time sharpening the big knife on a stone by the door and then offered it to me. "Go on," she said to me, and I gazed at her in puzzlement. "The pig," she said. "Kill it." I stared open-mouthed at her, looking from her face to the gleaming knife in her hand. "I couldn't possibly," I said. I remembered the horrors of pig-killing on the farms around Castle Door, the squeals and the flowing blood. I had always shuddered and hurried back to the life of a princess. "Someone has to do it," said Uni, "so why not you?" "Please don't make me," I begged her. Already, my experience of Uni should have taught me that this was the worst possible way of going about things. "I have noticed that you like to eat pig meat," Uni said haughtily. "The old carcass is empty. If you don't kill this pig, there will be no meat for you to eat." "You don't mean it," I said. Fat bacon was most of our diet. I knew she did mean it. Furious with her, I snatched the knife out of her hand and went to the pigsty. Bora had become a good friend of mine by now. At the sound of my footsteps, he looked up expectantly. I hid the knife behind my back and talked kindly to him, noticing the life in the bright little eyes, the pleasure in his grunts. I went back to Uni. "I can't do it," I said, throwing down the knife. "It's cruel." "So we shall starve to death," she said triumphantly, as if the prospect pleased her. I tried to argue with her. "I don't understand. I thought Dorans loved the creatures of the world and wanted to care for them." "What could show more love for an animal than eating it?" replied Uni. "But you are taking its life away from it, all it has." "For it to become part of the life in you. You are being false. What you will discover, if you ever stop being interested in yourself for long enough to notice the world around you, is that all life feeds off other life." "But not Bora. He's so sweet, and I love him so much that I cannot kill him." "But sweet or not, you would eat him if I killed him. Is that not right?" Shamefaced, I was forced to nod. I knew that I had only to smell bacon cooking to feel a wild hunger. "So long as you don't have to feel responsible for killing him. So long as the princess does not get blood on her hands. Wonderful." Uni's scorn hurt me, but I minded it even more when she picked up the knife and handed it back to me. "Hurry up. There is a lot of work to be done on the carcass, and we need to start while there is still plenty of daylight." I left her again, but instead of going back to the sty, I began to pace around the bottom of the tor. I had never been spoken to in my life in the way that Uni spoke to me, and it left me helplessly angry. It was then that I noticed I was brandishing the knife furiously in the air. And suddenly I observed with a faint glimmer of unexpected amusement that what I was doing in my mind was plunging the knife into Uni. I couldn't kill a pig, but I had a secret longing, at least just for that moment, to kill her. Yet I knew that my future as a Doran was linked to my obedience to Uni, and that she would refuse to teach me if I did not do as she said. I paused outside Bora's pen, praying to his spirit to forgive me. This time I did not hide the knife, and he looked at it without fear. I held his head in one hand, and with the other I slipped the knife beneath his chin. My heart pounding, I pushed the knife against his throat. Immediately Bora began to struggle, and with tremendous force he threw me back against the wall. I had not even cut him. Frightened now at the furious creature, I put the knife straight to his throat, shouting to him, begging him at the top of my voice not to resist. The knife made only the smallest cut, but suddenly blood began to pour out of him, and the knife itself was slippery with it. Bora backed against the wall with squeals that rang sickeningly through my head. I wounded him again, but he was still full of fight, and began to come after me with his head lowered, making a strange growling noise in his throat. For a while we circled each other, Bora wanting to attack me but afraid of the knife, me wanting to finish my terrible task but afraid of his hooves and powerful snout. Desperate, I lunged at him once more and knew from his scream that I had hurt him, but also that this big angry animal was now going to charge. I moved as quickly around the little space of the pen as I could, until suddenly my foot slipped in a puddle of blood and I fell. At that moment, Bora also fell, and I could hear his dreadful, labored breathing as he lay on his side. Swiftly I stood up, bent over him, and cut his windpipe properly. Although his legs twitched a bit, I knew he was within seconds of death. "Bora, forgive me," I said to him. "This was not my choice." White, shaking, covered in blood, I went back to the hut. For a moment I was too upset to notice that Uni was not alone. Indeed, that the hut seemed to be full of people. There was my mother, looking her most beautiful, her delicate pale face framed in a collar of fox. There was Aerith, shocked at the sight of me. There was Gamal standing by the hearth regarding me sympathetically, and beside him another boy about our own age, who stared at me in open amusement. I stood there looking mutely at them, blood-stained, my hair falling over my face, the knife in my hand. My mother made a small, stifled exclamation as she caught sight of me, and then was silent. Aerith was less restrained. "You look awful," she said. "I've killed the pig," I said unnecessarily to Uni, not knowing what else to say. Uni, quite unruffled by the company, nodded with a small, pleased expression, took the knife from me, and suggested that I should change my smock. Gamal, trying to act as if all was as usual, introduced me to Finbar, a new page at my father's court who had come to carry food and warm clothes, which my mother and Aerith had prepared for me. Even in these circumstances I noticed that he was a very handsome boy, with brilliant blue eyes and black hair. As I tried to speak to my mother, Finbar, where she could not see him, was pointing at me and silently pretending to hold his sides with laughter, like a mocking jester behind the throne. I thought he was the rudest boy I had ever met. Later, my hair combed and wearing a cleaner smock, I walked with my mother to the foot of the strange-shaped hill. A jumble of feelings fought inside me. Humiliation at being caught looking so dreadful. Anger at Uni for making me kill the pig. Triumph at finally having done it. Apprehension about what my mother would say. Would she persuade me to return to Castle Door? I realized I had very mixed feelings about that. For a long time neither of us spoke. "So, how is it?" my mother said at last. I started to mumble some reply but could not speak for the sob in my throat. My mother stood for a long time looking up at the steep sides of the hill, as if trying to read something from it. Then she said, "Of course you must come home if it is too dreadful. But I don't know. I have a feeling that you want to be here, awful as it is." An extraordinary surge of gratitude ran through me, gratitude that, although she was my mother, she could see and understand something that went beyond my thinness, my swollen fingers, and my own anger and perplexity. I began to cry in earnest because of her love for me, and she put her arms around me. "Why do I have to?" I asked her. "I don't know." "I felt so ashamed," I said, "that you and Aerith and the boys saw me all blood-stained from killing the pig, and that Uni and I live in such poverty." She lifted up her white profile and, looking like the daughter of a prince that she was, said, "You were always a brave child, Nanook. Knowing you, I expected you would live this ordeal with courage. Life with Uni is hard, but it won't go on forever." She smiled at me. "Don't despair." "I don't understand it," I said, "but I seem to need to be here, and yet it is awful." "One good thing," went on Erlaine. "We have brought you some food, some sacks of wheat and oats. That should help. That and the pig." She smiled at me again. "And Aerith put in some blankets and pillows and a thick woolen cloak." "Good," I said. "Gamal has brought you some cakes and some wine. You should get a decent supper tonight." "You do understand," I said in gratitude. I was humbled by my mother's generosity, at her willingness to let me, her only child, follow a strange path. I flung my arms around her, and this time we both wept. I also had time to talk with Gamal. "I shall come and see you sometimes," he said, "and so will Finbar. He's become a good friend. I'm teaching him our language. His home is on an island a long way north of England. He wants to be a navigator." I felt a pang of jealousy at Gamal's transparent enthusiasm for his friend. "I don't like Finbar," I said. "I think he is very rude." "You'll like him when you know him better. Everybody likes him. He's awfully funny, and he's brave." It was impossible to ignore Finbar completely when the party left. I held out my hand coldly to him, and he kissed it, as was the custom. Still taunting, it seemed to me, with mocking eyes. "I hope you will come again, Gamal," I said pointedly. I felt very lonely when they had all gone away, and I was back alone with Uni again, but I had no time to dwell on it, since Uni and I spent the rest of the day cutting up the pig, a tiring, messy business, so that it could be salted. We did cook some of it at once, though, and had a marvelous supper, which I ate ravenously. "We won't starve this winter," said Uni with satisfaction, looking at the sacks stored in the corner of the hut. "What did you do in other winters?" I asked curiously. "Survived," Uni said shortly. "The trouble with being hungry or cold," I said thoughtfully, "is that you think of nothing else. It's like having a pain. On the other hand, you really appreciate it when there is food to eat or a warm fire. I never knew food to taste as good as it has these last few weeks." Uni grunted. "I didn't know I could kill anything," I said, still minding about Bora, even though he tasted very good. Uni smiled, a wrinkly, leathery smile that I had never seen before. "You were a good, obedient girl," she said. "You didn't give me much choice," I replied crossly. "I am proud of you," she said, and I could scarcely believe my ears.